Good evening, friends. This is Shubha Lakshmi once again, and today I have come with another new topic for our lecture series, which we began on 17th of this month. And all those who have been joining us regularly, I hope these sessions are helping you in some way, and more importantly, it is helping you to create some awareness. So we will just wait for a while. Sorry for the I had some technical glitches, so I couldn't really start immediately. So if you are joining, so from so just let me know from where you are joining. If you are a new participant for our lecture series, there are many who have been joining regularly, so they need not really mention it again. And friends, today's topic is all about becoming a citizen scientist, and I'm going to touch upon citizen science as a whole as a topic, and also to let you know that how anybody can actually contribute to science. So that's today's topic. As the name rightly suggests, that citizen scientist, it means some a common citizen who can become a scientist, as simple as that. So let's start with a brief introduction to citizen science. So it is, as I said, it is a scientific work, but it is carried out by general public. Now to come to this level where you engage common citizens in your own research work, I believe it needs a bit of maturity in the field, maturity in terms of understanding people's abilities, because I know that there are many scientists who wouldn't like to work with volunteers because they may find it waste of their time. They feel that volunteers can't contribute the quality work. That is true also, but we are not here to say that a volunteer, a citizen scientist, is a replacement of scientist. No, it is like a citizen scientist could be an assistant to a scientist. So as a help, we have to look into that, and whether as a scientist can you break down your research work to into such a simpler form that anybody who has no background of science is still able to contribute. So I also feel that this is not a concept which can be applied for any type of research. I'm not saying that. I'm certainly saying that there is still a good amount of scope in many of the research projects where people can play a role, because people can come, like, it's like a free labor. If I put it that way, you get free labor of enthusiastic people rather, who are willing to work with you. So it is basically data collection. So citizen science helps in collecting data and not necessarily really giving an authority about the data what they are submitting. There are experts and scientists who are on the citizen science portal, or say for example, if I'm the one who wants to engage citizen scientists into my research work, so I will break down the work into such a way, that a simple way where a common citizen can just contribute the data without having any technical know-how of that subject. So I am the one who will be deciding whether this data that has come to me is right or not. So the quality control finally happens at second stage, but initially at least the data is being collected, and that's why citizen science. And this citizen science is not a new concept. In other countries, it has been happening for many years. We just started, I would say, 10 to 15 years back. We started in our country, and yet it has a scope to really expand into many spheres of research. So, like, since it is involvement of general public, it is also called public participation in scientific research. There were times when research projects were only limited to scientists, that only scientists can work on a data and develop reports. But eventually the research, because you can't do conservation without people. If you talk about conservation, you need people. So not we can just do a research and just bring out a report and tell people that this is what needs to be protected and you start protecting it. So we can't do that also. We have to make people, general public, as our partners in the conservation movement. So how you do it? So one of the ways of engaging in a very meaningful manner local communities is citizen science. So wherever one is working, they can look around them if there are any local communities who can actually play a role in that. And that's the reason many funding agencies now insist on having conservation projects, people project, people concept also, like people, how people are going to benefit, what is the community role into it. So community engagement, community participation is nowadays a very big thing, and it has to be like that because there has to be a buy-in wherever these projects are happening, and people are the one who can make it or break it. So I'm a very big fan of citizen science, and the day I learned about citizen science, and since then I started practicing citizen science in my own way, in my own work. We can see that in actual citizen science kind of a project started in 1987. This is probably the this was started by BNHS, the Asian Water Bird Census. It was just census, telling people that which all birds you have seen. Just make a checklist. A checklist was given, and people, especially BNHS members, they used to just fill up the checklist. So that was a kind of citizen science, and you involve general public, and that's how data was collected. Yeah, but that's another story that one the statistician who was analyzing this data, so he used to make a joke. He said that I see a bulbul size varying from 5 centimeter to 12 centimeter to 20 centimeters. So how does this variation happen? Now this is where the data correction needs to happen. So we have to reject bad data, incorrect data, and we have to retain what is the correct data, and that you get to know when too many people are submitting the data. So with the multiplication, what happens that you finally get what is there's a repeat data. There is a particular data that keeps on repeating in the findings. So that becomes the final data, and then scientists can verify. But data wise, certainly this work the scientist has to do. But what the benefit the scientists get is that he or she gets so many eyes and ears and hands in all over the country wherever they want to work without a scientist going to these places. So that's the benefit of this. But actually, a typical citizen science project actually started somewhere in 2007. That is by National Center for Biological Sciences, where the Migrant Watch and the Season Watch was. It is still very much happening. So you can go to their websites and you can look up for this citizen science projects, and not necessarily there are regular citizen science projects happening. On and off citizen science projects are announced, like BNHS was doing one citizen science project on sparrows. To BNHS asked people that just count how many sparrows you can see. Now you can imagine, just counting sparrows is such a simple act, isn't it? So that is, but the scientists who are studying the sparrows, they are studying really more detailed or more other aspects of the sparrow, but they are just asking people to just send this data. So that is what I meant by simplifying data to bring down to such a level that anybody can contribute. And I never knew this till I experienced this, that anybody can do a research nowadays. Anybody actually, thanks to Google, thanks to all the open source resources which are available online, and all is that you need is your time and your interest in it. You can learn anything nowadays, right? So even research is like that. So research is no more. I don't think research should be only limited to scientists. Common citizens should also get a taste of it, for reason that we are not developing any more scientists from our country actually. If you see at a very earlier what India used to do, but now we are more into focus on all the IT related work. So India is producing more of IT and business tycoons and all that. That is all needed. But in the academic circle also, we need to keep on producing. And we are not getting younger generation of scientists nowadays. So we have to develop this thing so that it becomes a norm. Like it should become a norm that okay, like कोई बच्चे से पूछे कि बच्चे तो क्या बड़ा होगा, तो मैं साइंटिस्ट बनूंगा, जैसे nowadays people now it is just so strange that I was saying this when I was 10 years old that I want to become a doctor. Even today now students are saying the same thing, they want to become a doctor. डॉक्टर एंड इंजीनियर के परे भी दुनिया है, राइट? सो कैन वी मेक साइंटिस्ट ऑल्सो अ कॉमन career option for anybody to sign up? This all comes when our students, our children are exposed to research. So in schools we do have the research component which comes as a project, but unfortunately the treatment what the project is getting or how the projects have been done, that is not really serving the purpose of it. So everything just copy pasted from the Google, print out, making nice reports, and marks are given. So that's not the projects are done. So we are just trying to see that how best we can actually inculcate the research abilities in our students also, and citizen science could be one of them. So if you have children at your home whom you think you can inculcate this thing in them, I would suggest that please make them part of a citizen science program. I think that's the best way they can learn. As I mentioned that Google, because Google is there, so much of information is available. But the flip side is that you can Google scientific information so easily on Google. So I always tell people that if you are trying to look up for some information about some species, don't type the common name. Common name changes from geography to geography. So best is that stick to the Latin names. So if you have Latin names, with the Latin names you might get information. But again, when you put up a when you put up a keyword and you get thousands of pages showing the same information, so how do you judge that which is the right information? So not necessarily that you get the all 100% correct information, but yet the resources available. You need not go to library, you need not really look for those books because it is already done by Google and it is there for you. So therefore there is a ease of data mining is there. Secondly, mobile apps. Now so many projects have come up with mobile apps. Citizen science projects have also started using mobile apps. So mobile apps are becoming more and more easier for people to use because anything it is now believed that with a person, whether he has money or not, in his whether he is carrying money or not, but surely he or she would be carrying a phone. So phone has become a part of our, I would say, a body part almost. It's always there with us. So therefore making research that easy that you bring it to your mobile phone, so that more people start participating. So I'll just speak about more about this as we go further. So why citizen science? We already spoke about this, but here I would like to just give you an example with this picture which has been put up over here. So by the way, all the pictures which you see in this presentation are not ours. It is all we have taken from internet, and since it is a free source, what we have also creating, it is getting recorded. So therefore we have taken the liberty of using. So this is one this is one of the moth which was recently discovered in Arunachal Pradesh, and there is a very interesting story behind this moth, and it does really speak about citizen science. So there is a Butterfly India group. That time it was just Facebook was not there. Before the Facebook time, there's a Yahoo what to say, Yahoo group. Yahoo groups were there. So there is one teacher from Arunachal Pradesh. He came across this moth, so he had shared that picture on that group, and on that group it was later on identified that this is not a butterfly because the antenna is very different. So it is not a butterfly, though it looks like a butterfly called Bhutan glory. It looks like a Bhutan glory, but it's not a Bhutan glory. So it seems to be a moth. So it came to me then, and I was also very baffled. I was also sure that this is a moth because the antenna is very different to a butterfly, and also it belongs to one group of moths who have this entire long antenna with a serrated like a comb like antenna, one sided comb, long one. Entire antenna has the same length of the spikes. So that was like they are called Burnet moth. So I knew that this moth belongs to that family. I didn't know anything beyond that. I looked up for on the books and everything, and then I found out that there is something very closer to this group, but not this one. I could find. So then I shared it with another expert who was in Hong Kong. Then I sent this information to him and I said that can you just help in identifying this moth. Now he's been like, he's been also actively interested in Indian moths for very long time. So he also felt that he couldn't identify this moth, and then he sent it out to his contact, who was a specialist in this group of Barnett moths, who was from Taiwan. So in Taiwan, this picture landed. Now you can imagine this all happened on emails. This entire research was going on email, and then when it landed up to that researchers in Taiwan, who then confirmed that this is a new species, and we all were really excited that we came across a new species. And then I was in BNHS that point at that time, and the scientist in Taiwan told me that if you can get a specimen of it, then it could be published as a new species. So I felt okay, I can give a try. And then I was with BNHS by the time. My director was also very supportive. He said, okay, you can go and find that moth. So I went to Arunachal Pradesh in search of this moth, and that was my first trip to Arunachal Pradesh rather. And when I landed up there, and I realized that I'm trying to look for a needle in a hay of stack, because it is so thick and so vast that imagine to find a moth like this was very difficult. So I stayed there for almost a week looking for this moth. I observed all sites where it should be found. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see, but I did observe that this moth uh, was seen in a location where Bhutan glory was flying. That at least I saw, and therefore I assumed that at that point of time, that if Bhutan glory is flying at this altitude, and by look wise also this moth is seen, so most probably they are mimicking each other. That could be, it could be a mimic of Bhutan glory, because this is also day flying moth, and Bhutan glory is also a day flying butterfly. So probably they are sharing the same habitat and same timings of operation. So probably a mimic of Bhutan glory. So that's all information I could share to the media that time. It was a very big news in Arunachal Pradesh. So we shared this information, and thereafter subsequently many people kept on trying. And in just few years back, for a group of the same person who actually found this moth, he had another group of researchers with him, and they actually encountered this. Now for this group who encountered it, so they already have this ready-made information available with them, that this is a new moth, they were looking for it, and this is exactly, they knew the location. And so the moment they found the moth, the specimen, so that's how the new species was identified. Now you can imagine, was it possible even to discover the species without the contribution of the teacher who saw it, then the group where he shared it, then that group which referred to me, then I'm using my network somewhere in Hong Kong, and the Hong Kong person changing sharing his network in Taiwan, and then finally, so this is what is all, it is a classic example of networking for research, but also how a common citizen like a school teacher was able to find a new species. So therefore, at least in field of insects, by and large, one can actually come across new species very easily, because there is not much of work done. So not much of work is published also. So whatever thorough study you do it, you will, if you do it all the taxonomical studies of it, then one will actually come across new species. So this is very good case study, I would say, as far as citizen science is concerned. Okay, so this value of citizen science works is that it is scientific. It's not completely accurate. It depends on what protocol the scientist is making. Say for example, if you like, there is one citizen science program which happens in US. They have bud busting, like when the bird flowers. So flowering time of particular tree. So they have listed some, say 15 to 20 trees. So they say, if you see these 15 to 20 trees which are flowering in your locality, just tick mark yes and send us and submit the data. So if you make information so simple, where people are not really interpreting anything and doing something else, it's just ticking off or saying yes or no. If you make that kind of simple, then the data is more accurate. If you keep it very open ended, you keep on asking descriptive, objective kind, like open ended questions, describe this, where you found it, then you will get lots of kachra and then it will become a headache for the scientist who is sitting and analyzing the data. So one is to really make the protocol so simple that it can, there is the least amount of the data problem is there, and also that the accurateness of the data could be ascertained. So that's so scientific. It is certainly scientific. It is educational for the citizen scientist who has never experienced research, who is not having a background of science, and who probably would have aspired to learn science but got into some other field, but later in part in life they're coming back to citizen science. So there is so much of education, more and more people getting aware of it. And also it is kind of a social contribution, because communities are coming together, communities doing together. Communities, if they want, they can actually protect their own habitat, their own neighborhood, their own national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. So people play a very important role, and if there is a people power is there, if people are very vocal about their area. For example, look at the example of RA in Mumbai. So people were so vocal about RA, yeah. So much so that the government had to think whatever policies they had made, whatever plans they had made for the place, they have to do some tweaking, they have to do some changing. So this is what is the power of research, and if you bring in people, then only this can transfer or translate into policy changes also. So who is a citizen scientist? So anybody who is actually interested in this field of contributing to science and has some time to volunteer, then they can become a citizen scientist. So one is that, like, this is what a citizen scientist will undergo once they get into it. So one is that it can become a hobby. One can learn so many things about different things which they were not knowing. They can connect with family also, because it can become a family activity. Every Sunday going on a birding trip, there are many families who do that. But if you put that birding trip, give the birding trip a twist of citizen science, that birds data one can easily just mark it on ebird.org. So if a family trip is going on for a birding trip, just contribute the data on the eBird site wherever you are. So it becomes a family activity also, and as I said, make discoveries, as we say, and more importantly, you get to be out in the outdoors. This is a pandemic time, I understand, but otherwise also, if you get a chance, you are on a mission when you're going out. You're not just going for a walk or something. So you get more of outdoor, you get more of sunshine, which is vitamin D, and then you're contributing to protection of the environment. And also, like, by being at home also, you're able to connect with so many people. Like, I was able to have connect, like, indirectly, the school teacher in Arunachal Pradesh could indirectly get connected with the specialist who was sitting in Taiwan. So that kind of connections are also possible. And as I mentioned, that there is no experience required, no education whatsoever. As long as you understand things, have the knack of operating the technology, is just good enough. And finally, it is good for your health, because you are always on move, and you are moving into habitats, which is very good for your health. So we are talking about, so this entire overview was meant that how citizen science can contribute to moth studies also. So we are going to talk about that. And so this is like a National Moth Week going on. 25th is the last day, when this last day of the National Moth Week. So here I am just sharing our experience, that how you can contribute to moth studies also during this National Moth Week, and how you can upload your data on these websites. There is iNaturalist website, India Biodiversity is there, Moths of India is there, some more are there. And we will just give you a bit of brief about these, so that how you can participate in this, how you can actually upload your data. So one is that let's get started. What is needed is that you just need to have your mobile phone or a camera, that's it, and just get started. So one is that you need to look for moths wherever they are, like near your home, near your office, wherever you can see the moths, you can actually look for them. But what is that, you will be collecting data. So the data, whatever you will be, the data through the moth which you're going to photograph. You might be collecting data about moth distribution, where this moth is found, and if you are able to even rear some moth caterpillars, you will be able to get data about the moth life history also. And with life history, you get to know which all plants the moth is associated with, and other ecological roles, roles of the moth which is playing in the habitat. Depends on how, to what extent you are going and doing these studies. All these aspects could be covered. Currently, if you're only trying to take a photograph of moth and uploading on a citizen science portal, then you will be contributing to the moth distribution. So, here is the so where you can find moth. I just said that you can find moth anywhere almost, during the evening time, especially where you can wherever the light source is there, the moths will come there. And if there is less illumination in that area, better, because moths prefer an isolated light source there rather than an entire area that is illuminated. You can find moths in your balcony also. If you have a white wall, they can come on that, or even on the street wherever it is, wherever you can actually photograph the moths, you can look for it. But if you want to especially invite them, then use a mercury lamp or any bright light and just see that if moths are visiting the light. A white screen should be there. It could be a white bed sheet, it could be a white wall, anything that white is there. So that white screen actually enhances the whiteness of this the area, and that's what the moths will get attracted to. And we already spoke to various in the previous lectures. We already spoke about mothing, that how mothing has been done, and how this light source could be used. So I'm not really repeating on that, but mothing is an activity of studying moths on a light screen, not killing them, but actually seeing them and just photographing them. So here is what this is a light sheet which we had set up in Goa, and one of our participant is actually photographing moths. Now once you collect these photographs, what you can do, so this data has to be uploaded somewhere where it makes some value. There is a value to the data once it gets published. Once people know about your data, then there is a more value to it. So one is that you can upload it on a India Biodiversity portal, this one, and currently they are running a competition also, where they are saying that whoever is submitting highest amount of records during the highest amount of records during this National Moth Week, they are going to get the moth book, my moth book, as a prize. We are sponsoring that prize. So if you are interested, please participate here. So this is India Biodiversity portal. So when you open up, this is how the home page will look like, and you have to of course you have to create an account, login account first, and then you can go into the contribute section, and in the contribute it will ask you to log in. So you have to register priorly, and then you can log in, and once you log in, then you can in the contribute what you want to contribute, whether you want to contribute to the species pages. You can see the pages below, species pages, like in the first section, or when you add the observation as it is shown in the second, all this. So what kind of information you want to upload, so you can just select that, or you want to put up a data sheet itself, so you can select that, and you can just try doing that, so that there is different kind, not only photograph, but there is more information you can add to this site. And here is how it will look like when you try to add a picture. So it is just simple, the way it is anywhere in Google, wherever you are actually sharing your photographs, the way it is done. So similar processes here. You can put up pictures, and then it just get uploaded, and it shows up under your name. So as many entries you can put up on your under your account, it will be visible under your name. So it is like an inventory. So another site, which is a global site, this is a global site. India Biodiversity was our national site. So this global site, here also you can do it. This iNaturalist is also having a mobile app. So you can download the mobile app, and you can feed the data right from your mobile also, because most of our photographs are on mobile, and you can directly send it on the mobile as well. So this is iNaturalist. Here also you need to register yourself, and here also it is very simple. It just says upload. You see the upload button. So when you click the upload, it will ask you what you want to upload. So you want to upload the observations, and the beauty of this part is that it will show you that, like you, in for your area, if anybody else has also contributed a data. So it will show a map also. That's a beauty over here. So you can add your observations, and here, like, add the photos. And here another, the plus point over here is that there are already group names, family names, species name, everything is already inbuilt over there. So they will it will prompt you that, do you think that to which family this belongs? So you'll say, okay, I think it could be a moth. So in moth category you go, then whether it will say, it will look like. So if you have any idea about the family names, you can select them also. If you don't have any of these names, so it's okay, you can leave it blank. There are experts or people who have been contributing good amount of data, they can actually correct and add a species name to your picture. And if that is validated by 3 more people, then it gets, confirmed that, okay, this is the right species. So unlike on Facebook, when you share a moth photo or something, one person says one name and the other person says another name, so it's all get mixed up, and you eventually don't know which is the right name. But here in iNaturalist, it's only the right name always is enhanced. And suppose by mistake I put a wrong name also, anybody can come and actually remove that wrong name. That is how this that is how it functions. And there are many international experts who are actually associated with iNaturalist, so you get across, connected to all these people. So give a try for both India Biodiversity Portal as well as iNaturalist website. So here, as I said, it can show you the groups. Are you sure that this could be the group you want to, your moth looks like this or what? So you can just select also, and then you can always do a guesswork. That's absolutely fine, because you don't have thorough knowledge about it. It's absolutely okay. So don't get worried with that. And similarly, there is another site called as Project Nova. This is also a global site. So you can upload your information. Try and, I would suggest that you can submit data in all the sites, but it will be good for you to manage all this. It will be good you stick to one site, so that you know that, okay, all my data is sitting here, and so it is very easy to focus. Otherwise, we are already operating so many accounts, so I won't recommend that you operate several citizen science accounts also. So this is Project Nova. You can give a try on this. And now, besides contributing to citizen science projects, say this National Moth Week is over now, okay, by 25th, and then you are wondering what I should be doing. No, you can contribute your data beyond that also. Year round, you can contribute your data to all the portals which I just mentioned, and your data will be always there. But if you want to go a step further, if you want to really work on a serious kind of research work, you want to collect data for your own, like something which you can analyze and publish paper, because the data what you put on citizen science, it becomes a it becomes like nobody's property. It's anybody can use that data. So so you're putting on the global platform, you're putting up your data. But if you want to publish papers, you want to collect more detailed data, so I would suggest we can use a data sheet. So you can take a Excel. This I'm just showing you a sample of data sheets. These data sheets are already available online. I'll suggest you can download it from there. But let me explain it. Say if you're observing moths, so this is what data sheet would look like that. So on which date you actually saw the moth. So the first is a date, then where you saw the moth, then the location, and if you have a GPS coordinates, nothing like it, then what time you saw the moth, you can put the time. Do you know the moth name? No, you don't know, so you can just write M1, moth 1, and later on when your moth gets identified, then you can fill up the rest of it, the family, subfamily, species. Yeah. Now this is one thing which is like a slightly technical part to check whether the moth is having proboscis, because a large number of moths don't have mouth parts. So even getting that information will be sometimes interesting, but not compulsory. Whether you can tell the gender of the moth, whether it was male or female. Again, if you don't know, you can leave it. It's only that if you get to know, like, because there are some moths which are sexually dimorphic, which means that male and female looks very different. So that information you can add, and that you can actually then start collecting the weather information for that particular day. So what was the weather like, what was the rainfall, what was the temperature, what is the humidity. Now there are many mobile apps also available where you can get this weather data. So try to feed in, because this weather data is very useful when you are going to sit and analyze an annual data of moths. It will really give you a very good trend, whether with the changing weather, whether the diversity change, whether the frequency of moths change. So that information will be there. So this is your data collection sheet. So collect as much information as you can. And the last one is the most important part for it, the lunar cycle. What cycle was there, like the new moon, full moon, and the different phases of the moon. So new moon is the time when moths are seen in large number, and as it starts receding, going towards the full moon, then the moth diversity drops. So you can put the cycle, like which cycle was it, like it was like the first day of new moon, second day of the new moon, because a new moon has almost, the phases is almost 1 week. In 1 week time the moon size starts increasing, in 1 week's time it starts decrease. So that different phases are there. So if you can actually put the days, first day, second day or third day, you can write that. So that is also going to be useful. Or forget about the days, you can write full moon, new moon, gibbous moon, crescent moon. There are different names also available for moon phases. You can use that and just keep following it, and keep this data, repeating this data, like keep on filling this information as and when possible. And if you have a substantial data, say you have accumulated more than 100 entries, then it worth to look at it. Or you have studied, say, moths from June to September, 4 months data you already have. So even that you can analyze, or you do a full year data and then you can analyze. You will get an interesting trend. Similarly, you can also do it for caterpillars, life histories. Yesterday I did this session. So this is a sheet you can use for, if you want to rear caterpillars, you can rear caterpillars. And here also you can actually fill in the caterpillar data, like the date when you saw, the location, the code could be C1. Again, this section you can leave. Then which plant the caterpillar was seen. If you don't know, just leave it, but they get it identified. If for every, you have to photo of a plant, you need to have the photo of the caterpillar to get the experts to identify, and then so that you can fill in the information. Then but the body length, what is the length of the caterpillar when you got it, what was the color. And then as the caterpillar keeps on shedding this, like molting, you can keep on taking its measurement. So this C1 data will keep on repeating. And then the day will come when the caterpillar is going for pupation. When was the date, when did it emerge, what was the duration, what was the medium it used, and so on. So this data also you can use. So here is a this site. You can go to Birdwing Publishers, that is our site, Birdwing Publishers website, and click on the resource section where you will get this data sheet available. You can just download it and you can use it. And if you get stuck somewhere, you can always contact us. So what do you do with all this data? So one is that this data will give you information about your own locality. Wherever you are going, you can actually collect the data, and this you can have, you can keep writing article or blogs if you're interested in doing that. You can have an online group of projects. So you can say for example, I'm staying in Kharghar. So I will say that I will start a group called Kharghar Moths, and I'll try to upload all the pictures of Kharghar moths, and I'll ask more of people from Kharghar that have you seen these moths, and please post your pictures. So you can have this community engagement kind of activity also. Write good research articles. You can write articles in popular magazines like Hornbill, Sanctuary, and so on. And also you can create a Flickr account. Now Flickr account is purely meant for photographs. More than Google Photos, it is Flickr account that is more popular. So you can create Flickr account, because all your photos can be sitting there. If you want others also sharing of photos have to be done, you can do it from there. And also you can actually share it on the Facebook groups. So you can join the Facebook groups and keep on sharing your data on this group, saying that I got this moth from my locality, what this could be. So you have a network also. So you will get to meet so many like-minded people, both in terms of experts, both in people like you who are also learning. So it is like a different group that you are formed. These people will be different from the friend circle that you are having currently. So it's a completely your academic circle. You're not into an academic, it is like a hobby, but the work what you'll be doing in this is not like hobby, it is serious science that you will be contributing. So don't underestimate or don't get intimidated by seeing that, oh, science is not my cup of tea. But if you are a nature lover, and if you like looking at things, if you like doing observation, if you are doing photography, I think you're already into it. All the citizen science is asking you is just to put a form to it, give a system to it, so that, and I keep telling this to many people who are into like birding, butterflying, plants. In birding, there is all this life force concept is there. So what is the fun in just having a life force? Like you keep on making a checklist, but you don't contribute anywhere. Contributing is very important. So don't keep it to yourself for your own personal satisfaction. No, it is meant for a larger goal. The goal is much larger than your personal satisfaction. So you can take photograph, you can keep your own things for yourself, but keep sharing it. Putting up into a public domain is very important. That's where it contributes science. Your data, when it is sitting on the citizen science portal, it is feeding into so many scientists across the world. It is feeding into their work. You will never come to, they sometimes they acknowledge also, but if it is like that one particular moth picture which I have shown, it becomes, the acknowledgement will obviously there, but your data from your locality will be useful for some researcher who is sitting somewhere else. So you are contributing to science without even knowing it. And many times in the acknowledgement, they do mention that from where they got the data, and who was the person who collected the data. So why not? And as I said, that you can also publish papers. Yes, it's even people can also publish papers. I did a small citizen science project with my three volunteers, lady volunteers, whom I said that I wanted volunteers rather for my research work, and I was looking up who can volunteer their time and money with me, because we were to travel different locations to study moths, and I was not really ready to meet up all the expenses. So I wanted to see if anybody is really interested in doing that, and I only promised them that if you contribute, if you support me by being with me and helping me, and you are taking your own, taking care of your expenses, I will promise you a paper. I will promise a joint authorship in my paper. And this is what I did. So there's three ladies who had not much of science background, not much of academic training kind of thing. Some of them were actually housewife also, and they got a paper published in their name. Isn't that cool thing? Yeah. So it is possible. So anybody can publish paper, provided you are going in a more systematic manner, and provided you are collecting the data in a scientific manner. And it is, as I said, that if you have understood my presentation today, even if you are not having any science background, there you go. So it is that simple. But when it comes to doing work, now it is not that simple. It is a donkey work. And I tell you, research is a donkey work. And that's the reason now there are not many scientists. Why? Because you have to keep on doing same work again and again, again and again, again and again. You have no luxury to get bored of it. You have no luxury of quitting from it. Yeah. So when I used to do my moths studies, when I was doing my PhD, you can imagine that I wanted to see whether the moths, like I was studying moths in Sanjay Gandhi National Park, so I had to see the moth frequency throughout the year. So to know that in which all months the moths are seen, I had to put up the light sheet throughout the year. And believe me, right from January to April, my light sheets were blank, and I had to sit every week just to note down that no sightings. So in research, no data is a data. So if you want to have no data, the zero value has a value, because for giving the zero value, you have to work. So I had to really put up the light sheet for this 4 months just to say that, okay, no moths are seen. And then from November onwards, again the moths numbers are going down. So to know that, it was like getting so bored, like I have to keep the light on whole night, and I'm just sitting and watching and nothing is happening. You can imagine how boring it could be. So that is what the hard work this involves. So this is no fun. It is fun actually, I get a very high when I do my mothing. So once you get into it, it is very fun, but fun with the hard work. So that is the bottom line I would say. So if I painted a picture that wow, it is so easy, yes, it is easy, but I'm adding the last important part. It is a hard work and it is a dedication because you have to keep continuing it. Can you, like even for this National Moth Week, can you observe the moths every night? So you can train yourself. You never know that what potential you got until you actually stretch yourself. I always see that. So give a try of becoming a citizen scientist, and if you find somebody else who is also who you think could be also interested in this subject, please share this information with them. And this is a very good opportunity for students, especially students from 5th standard onwards. You can engage them in this kind of projects. Bindas, they will be excited. Today's students are so smart and they know so much thanks to Google, because they will read everything on Google and then they will question you. So it's so difficult to answer them sometimes. So give them this hands-on experience of working in the field through the citizen science approach. So friends, that's my short presentation on citizen science, and if you have any queries, you can drop here itself, or you can write to me on this email ID which I have published. And if you have any at any point of time, whenever you plan to take this up, or you want to you want some more information, you can contact me. I'll be really happy to help you out. So thank you friends, thanks for joining, all those who have joined today for this session. If you have anything questions, so please let me know. Thank you so much.